Welcome to our live talk on the anxiety series. Sadly, our speakers are a bit late today, but we are expecting Kacy Crystal-Spörer from the ADHD Academy in Germany. Here she is. And Dr. Gautam Arora from India and Dennis Kitinji from Kenya. So we will see whether our speakers come online in time or not. Hi, Kacy.
Hello. Sorry, I had troubles with the computer.
Yeah.
So,
We are still waiting for Gautam and Dennis to kick in. And in the meantime, we are all alone talking about the anxiety series and health anxiety. For me, health anxiety is the topic in all the anxiety series, which I think is the easiest, at least in therapy and in diagnostics, because when somebody just has anxiety about getting ill, and usually I think we can get um, a lot done here with cognitive therapy, awareness training, meditation, and don't have such immense problems as we do have in body dysmorphic disorder. What would you say? Kat is agreeing, by the way.
yeah, no, I do agree with that. Anxiety is something that's not rational in that sense. We don't think about why am I anxious? It's an emotion, and it's something that's um, let's say promoted and supported by different parts of our brain. I'm very brain oriented. I don't know if you told the people what I do. I work as a coach for adults who have to deal with ADHD. And anxiety is a great part of the problems, in a sense, or the challenges that our clients have to deal with. There's fear of so many things, worry as to whether anything will get better ever, whether it's possible. And they often have a high level of anxiety. But I don't know whether it's something that one can truly work on in a logical fashion. I think in some ways you have to help people to understand that this is something that they have or they that is created out of fear of the future, out of fear of whether there's a path to the future that will actually support them. And it's this continuous, I'm sure it's going to
Overthinking,
be bad, I'm sure it's going to be bad, I'm sure it's going to be bad. And there are
continuous
ways, of course,
overthinking
to work with that. And
and bad
Marianne, mhm,
patterns.
yeah. Marianne, what the work that you do where you work with the breath, where you work with consciousness raising exercises, where some of it has to do with when you fall into a period of anxiety of how am I going to get this done? How is this going to happen? My goodness, what's going to happen? It's going to be terrible. Because the tendency is that we project the negative future. It's part of anxiety. And some of it is that we have to literally, now I know this is symbolic, we have to literally grab our brain, our thoughts, and focus them on something else. And it's not
Mhm.
always a question of avoiding the issues, it's a question of understanding that if we are not focused on something that we can actually deal with at the moment, our brain tends to negativity. It's something that's hardwired into us as human beings, or as, let's say, as living creatures on this earth. Going back to the very beginnings of the development of humans as such, we had to be anxious in order to live. But the
Right.
difference is animals have anxiety also, but it comes and
Yeah.
it goes because they don't live with it continuously, but they're constantly aware of what's negative. And we as human beings, unfortunately, have developed a circle, a cycle of remaining anxious, and it drags us down into the worst parts of thoughts and of
Down
energy.
into the
Yeah.
pits.
So, how do you see that?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. About animals, the anxiety animals experience is mostly trauma bound. And it can be a continuous anxiety.
Mhm.
which has higher levels and lower levels. But when we think of the health anxiety, you know, I studied veterinary science. And during veterinary science, when you study all the bacteria and all the viruses and all the fungi, and you hear about all the diseases of all the horses and the pigs and the cows and the rabbits and the dogs and the cats, you begin overthinking and you begin to detect quite every disease you ever learned in your own body. And it's a well-known phenomenon. And the elder students tell the younger students that that is going to happen. And then, if it happens, they all say, first you go for a blood test. And if there is nothing, then it's nothing. Then we need to talk because then all your symptoms are psychosomatic, coming from your studies and your anxiety bound and your overthinking, and nothing ever will happen. But it's good to experience it because then you know how the disease, if somebody ever has it.
Well, I mean, people who tend toward what we call hypochondria do that. They
Mhm.
will see symptoms and they will adopt them. But people who live in anxiety, it's one, it's exhausting. Two, it affects your whole attitudes about life and living. It makes you very
Yeah.
negative that it can never change. With my specific arena of ADHD, because people have so often been judged as being different, as being not right, as being, um, how can you think like that? Why can't you think like everyone else? There is a high level of anxiety, particularly in social situations. We have a lot of people who have um, social anxieties, meeting new people, going into groups of any sort, because they have been judged in the past. But the carrying the anxiety in with you predisposes you to getting into situations that
Yes,
will not
yes.
necessarily.
And if we think back to Corona and all the mass hysteria there, was a fabulous ground for people with health anxiety because they could see the trouble everywhere. And they had to stop meeting, they had to wear the mask all the time, they had to go for every vaccination that was available, and they still were in fear and got corona more often because of fear, because anxiety suppresses your immune system. And those who were just quite stubborn and said nothing ever will happen to me, in the end, those were better off.
Well, it depends. An awful lot of them died. Now, I have to say to everybody that Marianne and I differ on our attitudes about the corona, the different mutations that are happening about vaccinations. So we have very different attitudes. So
Yeah,
this is
but
just to prepare
it
you that.
was, for me, there was a mass energy evolving,
Yes.
which took people in anxiety, which usually were not prone to, but those people who already had health anxiety, they really were bad.
Well, I think we have to realize that in order to survive as human beings now, as people with each other, we have to have a healthy level of anxiety. There's a very big difference between a healthy level that keeps us from doing stupid things and a level of anxiety that cripples us. And I believe that essentially the discussion today is more about the anxiety that cripples one, but you have to recognize human beings who don't have enough anxiety tend to die young. They do stupid things.
Um,
I'm not talking about illnesses now. I'm talking about
I,
they
and
get
I
into
understand.
situations because they aren't, and this happens with ADHD a lot because a lot of us have an inability to work well with time, which means we can do things without being able to suddenly understand what the result might be.
Mhm.
People in relationships who then meet someone else who's interesting and they don't think about the fact that their partner might not like this. What they have as a relationship is not something I'm judging, but that they may only get to see their kids on weekends. They may lose half of what they've built up financially simply because they haven't thought about what the repercussions would be. And that means that
Confidence
they
is the key.
haven't, yeah. So there is, we have to establish that there is a healthy level of anxiety that keeps us from reacting badly in situations, keep us from being too impulsive, keeps us from driving cars in the dark when it's raining too fast because we decided we want to get home fast. It can help us. So anxiety as such, as with so many things, can be a help and it can be a hindrance. And I think we're primarily talking about anxiety when it hinders us, when
Yeah,
we're not in
definitely,
situations.
definitely. Health anxiety in the real meaning, being prone to any disease
Mhm.
and thinking that disease is going to hit you, that definitely is a crippling form of anxiety. For me, as a consciousness trainer, I make the difference between anxiety and danger.
Mhm. Yeah.
And when you're talking about healthy levels of anxiety, that is the point when I'm talking of danger.
Okay.
So driving a car in the dark with the rain fast would be putting myself into danger. And it doesn't need anxiety for me as consciousness trainer. It needs a good instinct and danger awareness.
That too. That too. But I think we have to understand that we have to be thinking about the repercussions of whatever it is we're doing. Whether we say something to our boss because we suddenly decide that he or she should hear that, that can not be a good situation. But anxiety is such when it prevents us from doing things that are part of a normal life, when it prevents us from leaving our apartments, when it prevents us from um, having contact with others because of fear. I mean, Corona is a very good example of that. There were still people who got together who put in their own safety rules of distance, of meeting outside, of taking walks, of things like that. They were able to have a social life, but they did it in such a way that they weren't in danger in that sense. But the anxiety did not keep them from living. And with other people, they pulled back and became little snails in their shells
Mhm.
out of
Oh,
fear.
that's right. That's right.
But so
Yeah.
it's a question of balancing things off. But if people are crippled with anxiety, and I think that was sort of the beginning point of what you wanted to discuss today, the question is, what can you do? What could help one to go on and live their lives, possibly having this little voice in the back, but not letting the little voice control them.
Yeah. There's always the difference whether the anxiety is possible, has the possibility to stop you acting,
Yeah,
stop you navigating your life. And when the anxiety really is crippling you, then you can't live your life any further because the anxiety takes over the navigation of your life.
yeah. I mean, the people with ADHD who have difficulties with being in social situations because they tend to not fit in well, instead of understanding that they need to find groups where they do fit in, or to be able to accept themselves in such a way that they say, listen, people, I have a different slant on living in life. Enjoy me for who I am. But many are not able to do that. And it's not unusual that they isolate themselves and they're sure that only bad things will happen and they exude an aura of being victims. And it's a problem because if you exude the aura of being a victim of I'm going to get blows from other people, frankly, there's something in us that notices that, and people who are normally neutral or nice will pick at someone who has a victim mentality. I mean,
Definitely,
I
that can
there,
happen.
I have someone that I'm working with right now who has to deal with that. And even as an example, she was in a guided group recently with a social worker as a leader. And this was a group for people who are all different in one way or another. She gets support. And she does have this mentality that she's a victim. And she was harassed the entire time. So she left the group early. And now she doesn't want to ever try something like that again. But it has to do with being able to stand who you are also. I mean, if you have the attitude of being a victim, people are going to pick at you. And you need to work on your sense of self and your sense of acceptance and of finding out what your strengths are. Um, but I am not a victim.
That's an
Yeah, I
that's an
don't know.
interesting thought,
Yeah.
because if you are thinking of being a victim to disease all the time,
Mhm.
definitely the germs will get to you.
Possibly, maybe your attitude
Possibly.
does do it.
It's some kind of similar situation. And of course, I know that ADHD people and all people in the spectrum
Mhm. Yes, exactly. When I
are
say
very
ADHD, I
much
mean spectrum.
prone to the health anxiety and prone to be victimized. And it's very, very important, and we can stress this today again, that being on the spectrum has nothing to do with having a disease.
No,
Being on the spectrum is just a brain that functions in a different way, but that's no disease.
it's not a disease. What it can be affected by, though, is a lack of awareness of what we need to do to protect our body as such and to be supportive of our body's health. And it's not just with people who are on the spectrum, although they tend to be prone to it. Um, if we support our bodies in health, we will not tend to get as sick or will not tend to get the illnesses that surround us. But there's a lack of awareness, and it's not just the awareness. Many people know what they should do, but they don't do it. It's a lack of follow through because it's often more effort. The question is, what kind of quality of life do you want to live? And many, I mean, many diseases are also genetically, let's say, triggered. But as there's a psychiatrist that I very much like, he says that your genes are like having a gun, but the bullets are your behavior. And you don't have to, if particularly if you know that particular things run in your family that tend to be genetic, you can work against it. But if you don't do it, if you have an unhealthy lifestyle, of course that's what's going to happen. You yourself can have an effect on what the rest of your life will be. But it's not just knowing what should be done. It means on a daily
Doing
basis
it.
actually doing it. And for many of us humans, that's quite a big step. It means watching what you eat. It means watching that you drink enough. It means watching that you support your body by exercise. You make sure you have quality sleep. If you do all those things, the tendency will be that you will not trigger those genes, and you will not trigger whatever's running around in terms of germs in the area or in that where you live. Um, it's no guarantee, but your chances are much better. So there's a lot of things going on here. We're talking about
Yeah.
health. And as you say, most people are worried about, I mean, as you get older, I'm over 70. As you get older, there is a little voice in you that's going, oh my goodness, my memory's not as good as it was. I wonder if I'm beginning to fall into dementia or, oh my God, Alzheimer, whatever. Um, it's something that you have to live with, but if you're not doing things to positively support your body and the blood flow in your body to your brain, because everything we experience is here, then your chances are better of going a dark route. So a lot of it has to do with self-responsibility. Once again, believing in yourself and believing in the potential you have to affect your life. Some people don't believe in that.
Yes. So one point that we are finding here is, for one, being on the spectrum is no disease.
Right.
So don't
Thank you.
victimize yourself if you're in the spectrum. And if you know somebody who is in the spectrum, don't victimize it, or don't let them victimize themselves. And then taking over responsibility, because one thing is having health anxiety, the other thing is being very self responsible and taking care of your health, meaning have a look at what you eat and drink. have a look on how you live your life. Have a look on all the traumas you collected in your life and consult somebody who can deal with it. Get
Well, who can help
context
you deal with it in any event? Yes.
and do your exercise and watch in which climate you live, whether you can somehow live in that climate or not, and watch what medication you take. If you need to take some medication, always go to the natural path first. Don't take chemical things if you have an herb that can do it as well, because the side effects of the herb will be less. And if you take pills, chemical pills, see to it whether they can be combined if you take one or two or three per day or even more.
Mm.
Because sometimes they just are in conflict with each other and create symptoms nobody wants to have.
Well, that's correct. But part of that also is, how can I say this? Um, I am more a proponent of allopathy
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
more
yeah.
than Marianne is, but I always totally support a dimensional approach to anything that your body is going through, your mind is going through. So yes, um, if you have medications that you should be taking for one reason or another, find out about it. Be responsible. Be on be on a normal level with your doctor. They are people who have learned a trade. And some of them are good, some of them are not. Some of them rely on the written word because it protects them should anything go wrong. But make your own decisions about your own health, and it involves responsibility. And if you let fear and anxiety get in your way, you're in a much less positive situation than if you decide to support whatever it is that your doctor is recommending with the natural products. I agree wholeheartedly with that. Um, there is a there are many things that are in the gray area, and I agree with you, Marianne, that many things can be dealt with as well on a natural level. Once again, you have to find information, find people who are good, who know what they're doing. And there are illnesses that you should not be doing it with. That I'm not going to go into that, but there are illnesses where if the doctor is recommending a treatment that has been developed that will very possibly help you, you need to be thinking about it and accept if it's one of those diseases that you do that. Um, don't mess with cancer. I understand that there are many things we can do to support healing, and I'm fully in support of that. But if you have been diagnosed with cancer, do not just go a naturopath way. That's my particular personal opinion, and I'm sure that Marianne, that you have a different one. But
I'm
I'm
just
fully
thinking
supportive.
of Una,
Hmm.
which we had on the interview lately, and Una has been on stage 4 breast cancer,
Hmm.
and she survived. She went for chemotherapy, but she did as well take her nutrients, and she said the thing that made her survive was getting out of any anxiety by doing her Buddhist meditation, and that helped her the most.
100%. 100%. Don't give up on the medication that is required for certain diseases, but do everything you can to support your body, everything you can to support your soul.
She
Um,
actually wrote a
Meditation.
book about it, that the main thing for her was getting out of the anxiety. And then she could take the chemical treatment. She said that was more for her family than for her. She
True.
was into the divine. She felt good. She didn't have any side effects from the chemotherapy. And she did put that on her Buddhist path as well. And she's absolutely free of everything.
Exactly.
She's now working as some kind of clinic clown in children's cancer hospitals. She's giving back a lot.
That's it. That's working with energy. It's supportive of medical practices. I think that's fantastic. You know, I've worked with that myself. I've personally have had a thrombosis at one point in my life, and was in the intensive care for a while where they were trying to dissolve it. And the doctor had warned me that the medications would make me quite ill. And once again, following your ideas, I went
Ah,
into that and I had no effects whatsoever from them. Unfortunately, the thrombosis didn't go away, but I'm living.
I just remember Professor Dr. Michael Fraß, which we have on the homeopathic talks once in a while. He's retired now, has his private office, but has been a specialist in the ICU unit, a professor for intensive care, and a homeopath. And he combined.
That's what's the best.
And he had
100%.
so many successes where everybody else was just in a failure.
Mhm.
And his thing was always about combining.
Exactly. It's combining, and it's not just the homeopathy, it's the attitudes that you're working with. I agree with you 100%.
Gautam just wrote that he had an electricity shutdown and he's not able to log in, internet failure in Mumbai. So I'm taking a stand for him. Actually, for the homeopaths, health anxiety is something which is quite easy to treat because we have so many symptoms and written in the repertory where we can rely on. It is very complex concerning fears. It's very complex, even concerning fear of germs, fear of special diseases, um, has combinations in time and with pain and with sleep disorder. So a well-known homeopath and a well-studied homeopath like Gautam has it quite easy to take the health anxiety symptoms of somebody and prescribe.
This is true, but you also have to, there have to be ways that you can separate past negative experiences from the fear reaction, and this has to do with trauma, essentially. We're talking trauma
Mhm.
also now. Um, you have it has to be dealt with multidimensionally. I agree with you.
Yes,
You
but
have the best chances of doing
the homeopathy can very well deal with the trauma.
it.
But for me, consciousness training obviously is the one and only method. And for
Mhm.
you, I know that in case of trauma, you like to integrate the EFT tapping.
Yeah, it's something that seems to be quite helpful as long as people do it. Once
Yeah,
again, we can know what needs to be done, and
definitely.
that can be fine. But if we do not do it, if we do not help our bodies to understand this is helpful, if we don't do breathing, if we don't, the training that you do with all of your students, Marianne, if we do not learn how to quiet ourselves, if we do not learn how to, in whatever form we do it, meditate. ADHD people cannot meditate in by sitting, but we do active meditation.
You
It's
can do walking meditation.
exactly. So we you have to find ways that you can do it. But these are all things that connect us with ourselves and give us strength. And
Mhm.
if we do not do that, we have a much harder road ahead of us. You have to take responsibility for your life, and you have to stop blaming people in the past for where you are now. It was as it was. We need to make those things memories, but not triggers anymore, because that will affect our.
That's well said.
What you were saying about your friend who had the breast cancer, she was doing the medical treatments, she was doing homeopathy, and she was working with herself and with her own energy. The combination is what gives you the best chance to live a positive life. So many people fall into anxiety about dying. And it's one of the negative things that our brain will take us to if we're not involved in living. Um, I've seen this again and again. When people are have too much time where they are not doing anything, not thinking anything, where they are possibly at home, our brain is wired to always be tending toward negativity. And if we do not work with ourselves to understand that and not be forcing ourselves the other way, you cannot force meditation, but to understand and with humor and love to guide ourselves into a place where we can come to peace within ourselves.
Let me give a hint about heart rate variability
Please.
because for people who have health anxiety and when they want to calm down and do breathing techniques and monitor that, there are quite easy biofeedback methods
Mhm.
where you can monitor whether the breathing techniques you do really have the possibility to get you from, um, let's say, some condensed, too short heart rate variability into a coherent state.
Mhm.
Because when you're in an anxiety state, you are in a sympathetic tonus.
Yes.
Your sympathetic system is totally out of balance. And what the breathing techniques can do, they can rebalance you, and you can even measure it with a little tool, which shows that you get from red over blue to green.
What is the tool? I'm very interested in this because
That's it's the heart math inner balance trainer. I will send you a link and I will post a link
yeah, please
beneath the
post it
video.
in the chat for those people who would be interested.
It's
It's
the heart math,
yeah.
which is Heart Math Institute, is
Uh-huh.
in California, seated in California, doing heart rate variability um, research since more than 20 years. And they developed this so-called inner balance trainer, which people can easily load down an app for iPhone as well as for Android. And then you have a pulse detector, which you put either on your ear lap or on your finger. And from the pulse, this little app and connector, they do the maths and show you your heart rate variability.
Mhm.
And then you can do the breathing techniques your heart math trainer told you to do. And
Mhm.
if you do them right, you will see that within 2 to 3 minutes, you're getting out of this high sympathicotonic
Mhm.
thing way into coherence, and you feel totally different in a coherent state. That's not the meditation state that takes you more on the parasympathetic side. It's
Mhm.
in between. That's the state any cat is in, you know,
Mhm.
sitting on the sofa, totally relaxed, every muscle relaxed in the body, and on the slightest noise of a treat, alerting in the kitchen.
It sounds good. I will look into it. Thank you very much for the information.
This is the coherent state, it's the best state you can be in because you're in a very good point of taking in information,
Uh-huh.
but totally relaxed in your body. And so all the information can be really processed in the brain and is not taken away by filters of anxiety or anything else or stress filters.
That's
You're totally out of the fight, flight, and freeze reaction in in that coherent state. It's the only state where you can really act as a creator.
that's
This is why so many creative people work with white noise or something to get
mhm.
themselves into that state.
Yeah. No, it sounds very good because many people need some sort of a proof that it's worth investing the energy that they do something that seems strange to
Yeah.
them.
So
So, yeah, I like
when
that one.
I'm working with people on health anxiety, what I'm doing is taking in the heart math techniques, and then we are going through the triggers, and we learn that even if a trigger happens, what the usual response in the body and in the mind and in the feelings is to that trigger. And then we see that we can find a new thing, which we then implement while we are doing breathing techniques.
Thank
So
you.
one
That's good.
example, people run into anxiety because on social media they hear this and that and that and that, and they that very moment have the disease or have the fear to get the disease. And then we know, okay, in social media that can happen, that can trigger. And from social media, they usually jump to Google and Wikipedia and read along all those illnesses.
Although Wikipedia is not always right. And I think it's important that we
Dr. Google is never right.
Dr. Google can also be wrong. It's very important.
Yes,
These are made by
yes.
people who are not necessarily experts, all of them.
Not even doctors.
But
So
it
what
brings
they
interesting
learn,
thoughts up.
what they learn is not to switch from social media to Dr. Google, but instead switch from social media to breathing techniques and to scan their body to see whether there's really something. And if they find there is really something, they do what I was told as a student when I had all those illnesses: go to the doctor, make a blood test, and let's see. Get down to numbers and facts.
Well,
Get out of
I
the
like this because
thinking.
it can help them to see that this really does something. We have to keep in mind that our brain is it's a wonder. It's amazing, and it likes the excitement of negativity more than the very nice calmness of positive things. And the tendency to go onto social media is one that, but every time you do a click, you're getting dopamine in your brain, and your brain goes, I like this. I'm excited. I'm right here. And as you look on negative information, you'll follow the tracks. Your brain is getting dopamine the whole time. And the idea of going into a state where your brain is possibly swimming in serotonin, i.e., happy, happy, is something it will accept, but it's much more interested in negatives. They tried doing a newspaper here once a week in the city that I live in. I live in Stuttgart, Germany, that was all positive. Every Sunday, there was a part of
The
the
good news.
magazine that was positive. They had to give it up because nobody read it. Nobody wanted it because what attracts our brain, and this is wired into us as living creatures, is that which is negative, and it fascinates us. Look at the people who are fascinated by um, reading stories about crimes or reading stories about bad things. They'll read about what
Yeah.
are newspapers full of? It's because every time we get dopamine and our brain says, yes, they may be dying, but I'm not dead yet. But I'm going to watch out and see everything I can learn about it because I'm not going to get in that situation. So there's a trap here, and people have to understand that. I love the idea about the heart rate variability if you can measure, because then you can prove to yourself that this is a path that is effective and that will bring you
Mhm.
to a place where you can begin using your brain for what it's for, which is thinking and not being in flight, hide, or fight.
Yeah.
Um, we want to
Yeah,
get out of the reactive modes and control our lives.
you can do all the research by yourself, you know. You can put this sensor on the ear and you have your app running, and then you read the news and you see that you get out of the coherence, that you get into the bad heart rate variability. And
Okay.
then you can stop and go for some meditative music or relaxing techniques, and you see, oh, I'm getting coherent again.
That's true. Well, some people would say, "Oh, yes, but you're avoiding life." Keep in mind that the attraction is the negative. It's
Uh,
that's what interests us. I know exactly. Also,
oh, I
yeah,
I tried it out in many life situations. The most fascinating thing I found out was that whenever I'm driving faster than 110 kilometers per hour, I'm getting out of the coherence.
that's interesting.
That was very interesting. And whenever I did meet a crossing on a highway, I went out of coherence.
Well, maybe it just means you're becoming more aware of the potential dangers around you, and that is hardwired, Marianne. That,
Yes,
it's like
but recognizing danger doesn't take you out of coherence. It's only the anxiety that takes you out of the coherence. And very
We didn't get to think
interestingly,
about that.
going into a seminar that was boring did take me way out of coherence, and I could get back. Whatever I tried, I had to leave the room.
Mm-hmm.
So from that time, I learned that I will avoid boring things. So interestingly, it's not the adventure kick that gets me out of the coherence. It's the boring that gets me out of the coherence. But everybody is different.
Everybody is different. That's true.
For some people, and for some people, driving, let's say 150 kilometers per hour, is some kind of adventure.
Yes.
For me, it's taking me out of coherence.
Thank you, but that
I
does bring
can't
up
do
the
it.
topic. We are all different. And what the thing is, we have to take the responsibility of finding out who we are. It's a question that meets us every day of our entire life. Who are you? What is it you want? What are the directions you're willing to invest in? Um, I agree with you, Marianne. It's recognizing that each one of us is individuals, but we as individuals have the responsibility to be constantly asking ourselves, who are we? Where do we stand on things? Are we anxious about things that are potential? Are we anxious about things that are going to happen if we don't do something? Because if we know that there are things that are going to be coming and we're not doing anything about it except falling into fear, we are victims of ourselves. You
Yes,
have to keep track. What is it you can do? If you're worried about disease, then protect your body. If you're worried about um, an upcoming event, a social event, then you cannot project the negativity onto it. You need to do something about it. You need to, let's say you are afraid of groups, possibly find someone that you do feel comfortable with. You have to learn strategies that will help you get through things. If you can't get around them, learn how to deal better with them. It has to do with using this wonder of a thing that's between our shoulder blades. It was given to us to use and not to react with.
yes, yes. And even for people who are afraid to go into groups, each group has an outer range. You can stay there. You don't have to go into the middle.
Exactly. I mean, I have a client who went to a large concert with a relative whom she trusts, and this is music that she likes, but um it's loud and it was a huge concert, and we did a whole session on what a strategy she could do, and we figured out things that would help her. She literally the person she was with, they tied a belt to their belt that you couldn't really, I mean, nobody noticed it, but she could hold on to it so she wouldn't lose them in the crowd. We agreed that she would find a place where there was a wall where she could stand with her back to the wall so she wouldn't be unsure. That she took water with her, that she didn't have to go someplace and buy something as the concert went on. There are many things you can do. If you're anxious, recognize it and find out, is this something I can work with? What are strategies I can do? Is this a real anxiety or am I doing this to myself? I have another client who, at the moment, is doing very well in her life. She's in school, she has a relationship, things are going. And yet, in the evenings where there's nothing happening, all of a sudden, I will get texts from her. I'm so afraid of dying. And this woman is in her 20s. I'm so afraid of getting sick. Because the minute she doesn't
Brain is
is
running.
involving her head in something that is positive, she her brain creates all kinds of fears. And at that point, she has to say to herself, stop it. And she has to purposefully do something that will give her brain something to do that will be positive. It's changing the state. It's a state change. But it could
This
mean she has to
is
get up and do something. It could mean that she has to do a breathing exercise and that she plays piano, she should go play music or she should do something that she likes, put
or
music on
start knitting.
and grab her brain from that negative thing and say, oh, we're going to do something else because it is her tendency. Now, once again, everyone's different. She tends to go negative as soon as her brain doesn't have anything going on. And if she has read articles about Corona coming back, if she has read articles about war somewhere else, if she has read articles about someone who had a terrible divorce, her brain takes that as stuff, and it does not affect her life at all. But it's what her brain likes to play with because there's so much dopamine there. Our brains are also physical parts of us. And once again, if we're not supporting our bodies by intelligently using this brain, we will have a much harder time in life. And there is anxiety that is real. When I think of parts of the world with where there is war now, the people have to live with a high level of anxiety. There is reality in there. Still, you have to do what you can to protect yourself, your family, and you have to make sure that you don't fall into the anxiety trap because it does nothing to help you. That's the point where you really need to bring yourself into balance, where you really need to look at the heart rate variability, learn about these things, to do what you can. And there's one point where, I'm sorry, you cannot die before it's your time. There is that also. And this is a philosophical attitude. But um, to get to that point, you have to purposely work at it. We're here to
Yes,
learn and to grow and to work with
for
others.
everyone who knows that that he or she has a high-wired brain, learn to meditate. Find some way for meditation. And if it is walking meditation, it's walking meditation.
Exactly. Our brain will fight against it, by the way, because our brain is used.
Only a few years.
It's like a small child who's used to getting its way. And our brain is stronger than our will. And we have to learn to work with it as it's almost as though, now I know this is just a picture. We have this little child in us that likes to get its way. And we have also a guide in us that touches back to who we truly are, who we came here to be. Um, Personally, I believe that we are more than our bodies.
Much.
We are souls who are connected to bodies, but we are not bodies with souls inside of us. Anyone who's ever done any energy work, even if it's nothing more than feeling the energy of your hands, or walking into a room and knowing somehow who you could talk with and who you should avoid. These are energy things. Um, There are many people who are afraid of death and dying. Our religious institutions usually teach fear of death because that's how they control you in your life. Um, but somehow we have to learn to trust the inner voice. There is an inner voice, and there is this part of us that is connected to that, and our little child, and we are in the middle. But our little child is used to grabbing our attention, and we need to start talking with this other part of ourselves and figure out what makes sense, how we can keep the little child occupied with things that are positive and not negative, and come to a point of balance within ourselves. But the little child will take over. If you're trying to diet, and many people know this, I say that because it's such a universal thing, um, you will decide that you're not going to eat sugar in any form. And yet you walk past the bakery, that smell hits you. And as you're walking out, having had three of whatever it is that you craved at that moment, you'll be thinking, oh my God, I didn't mean to do that. Because the little child just grabbed you. And it happens in so many different dimensions. That's just one dimension that many people have to deal with. Um,
That's
Anxiety does
right.
have a base in reality. If it does, do something about it or work with strategies that will help you deal with it better.
Yeah. And watch out of your heart rate variability because there's the key where you can move things.
Mhm. And
For
find
instance, if you go by the bakery and you are prepared that this smell can happen, you can easily skip to a breathing technique, get your self back in coherence.
exactly.
And if you're in coherence, you're not into the compulsive mode of going into the bakery. You can walk by smiling and say, got you.
This is true. I mean, this is where, as Moran has mentioned, I'm looking into the topic of tapping, known also as ETF in
Mhm,
English, and it can help because you have something physical you're doing.
mhm.
But it won't work for you if you haven't been doing it regularly because your brain has to understand, oh, we're putting on this energy. So you can't just know things theoretically and have them work. Find people who can help you with whatever issues you're dealing with. Find people who will help you come to be more of who you truly are, and not people who will say, follow me. We are human here being, and that means use what we have in this head. I mean, I think it's important that we also recognize there are parts of this world where anxiety is overwhelming and
Yes.
where trauma is a thing of daily life. And it's a completely different situation for those people. And we have to respect that, that for them, living in anxiety is what will keep them alive. So we need to see a certain degree of anxiety is helpful to our lives. It's when it cripples us that we need to find other ways of living because it's no life. If you make your life small and you make yourself small, that's not what we're here for.
No, if you can't leave the house anymore because you're so anxious to get ill, then there's time to get somebody into your life who can help you.
This is true. There are people out there. Just make sure they're working on helping you to become the better you, as opposed to become a copy of who they are.
That's right. So, Gautam can't come because of his electricity shutdown. Dennis obviously has another problem and doesn't show up. So I think we two covered what we two can cover here.
I agree.
And it's for me, it's important that to see that ADHD people,
And spectrum.
and I'm talking especially about ADHD people now
Yes,
because they love adventures.
absolutely.
They're so curious. They so love adventures that there can be a possibility to endanger yourself, especially on the health sector. And when it once happens, then you can fall into real anxiety. Whereas for the hypersensitive people, they always stay away from everything anyway. And for the autistic people, um, it's so much about having things in order and having things clean that it goes more to the compulsive direction, not so to the anxiety direction. But you can get to an autistic person by logic.
There are ways to work with everyone. It's just you have to be open to finding the ways that will work for you as the individual, um, godly in what way you want to say it, see it, um, energy that we are. Each one of us is an individual. Each ADHD person is different. Each autistic person is different, and all the people in between. And the important thing is to honor ourselves, to get help in finding out who we are, and to follow your own flame, follow your own path, and realize that we are here as beings of whatever the spirit is expressing itself. God cannot sense him, her, itself without us. We are expressions, and life here is precious. Um, it's important that we do what we can to support ourselves and to support others in being their own individuals. But if there are things we can do in our lives to make our lives or the lives for those around us better, then let's do it. It has to do with being active, finding ways that are appropriate for whoever you are, finding out who you are, what is it you want, and deciding that you're going to live the best life that you can, and then moving into it, finding out what that is.
That's true words. By the way, just for fun, I asked the AI what
Oh,
she
good.
thinks about health anxiety. And she said health anxiety is not much of a problem. And it's comes from trauma and so on and seeing things too much social media. But you can do something. And you want to know what the AI recommended?
Sure. Always curious.
Consciousness training, awareness training, meditation, breathing techniques, working on the triggers, and classical homeopathy because she said it's so individualized that you need a very good homeopath who can take the individual symptoms, and that would be a good fit for homeopathy.
Yeah.
Then I had to discuss with her why she knows about homeopathy and so on, and we went into deep discussion.
Keep in mind that AI was also created by this.
Yeah, but I was intrigued.
Yes.
What that program recommended was
Mhm.
interesting. But
Interesting.
hearing you say it's so individual and every individual develops an individual kind of health disease or anxiety disease, it's good to take it from the individual.
I think the most important thing that people should know is that there are other people out there who are supportive of positive, healthy growth and of your living a positive, healthy life. Find the people who resonate with that and make sure they're not asking you to follow them, but asking you to follow yourself,
Yes,
helping you to find out who you are, what's most important in your life, and what you came to do. That's our challenge. Becoming adults means we stop blaming those who came before us. I'm this way because of that and that and that. Good, okay. Well, find out who you are now and find out how to work with it best. They had their own problems. There's a phrase in English that says, we are all emotional cripples, every one of us. And each one of us was raised by emotional cripples. And we do the best we can in any moment. And if we are bound to the past and only react to those things that have brought us to where we are now, we will constantly be running to find
running
out
in
why
circles
we're the way we are. Find out who you are now and start working on building a better future. There are those who will help you on your path. Make sure that that's happening.
reminds me of our last session in the academy, which was titled Show Me What I'm Looking For. It was a meditation trying to connect it to the divine and create pictures that show yourself what you are looking for because the divine always thinks bigger than yourself.
It
It was
sounds
very interesting.
sounds very interesting.
Was very interesting. Was very interesting. So, Kacy, thank you for your attendance. Thank you
Thank you.
for talking with me about health anxiety.
Thank you.
And I hope that the people, as we stressed it so much today, will do something, at least if you go to social media or to go to Dr. Google, search about heart rate variability, search about heart math, and maybe it's interesting for you and you can come back anytime to me. We are doing a lot of heart math training in the.
This is true. Also, I would like to say that I have immense respect for the work that Marianne does. She has an academy. She offers many different courses for those of you who are somewhere in the world where you don't necessarily find the people that you would like to support you on your path. So please take a look at the links, go to the websites. Marianne also has an amazing project going where it's the DrDolittle project, where she works with animals, and please look at that website also. This is a work that she does that's only supported through donations, and it's well worth doing. She has a wonderful newsletter. And if you decide to join her newsletter, you also get the most amazingly beautiful videos of the animals and how they're developing. These are animals, keep in mind, she lives outside of a town. She's not in a town. And these animals all have come to her. Many of them were wild cats, dogs that have been out.
Wild dogs, yes.
And she, there's one recently, Merlin, who
Hmm?
wouldn't let anyone near him. And
No,
finally, after months, where he's been coming regularly for food, where he doesn't bother the cats because they all know if they come, they have to be part of the whole group. And he's finally let someone touch him. And this is something
Merlin now has his own color.
that is amazing too. But these
He
are
managed after
animals.
6 months.
Yeah. Marianne works with animals and with people who have been wounded. who have been out alone in the rain, who have been living in the wilderness, and she's one of the many spots of light on this earth. So please do check out what she offers. It's high quality. I've been working with her for years now. My life has changed immediately. I mean, hugely. Um, Look at FutureLink, look at DrDolittle, and whatever you do, blessings be that you're working with yourself, and always look for the godly within yourself and the godly with others. It truly is namaste, God in me,
Namaste.
God in you. And if you
So,
suffer from anxiety and you feel you can't get it under control, please do get help. There is help to be found. And if your anxiety is real, do something about it. And if your anxiety is something that is limiting you, but there's no reality to it, then learn how to work with it. It's part of you. Good. Then learn how to deal with it. See it as see it as a teaching part of you, something that spurs you on to learn more about what's really true. And never forget that a little bit of anxiety will keep you alive.
the little bit of anxiety that I call danger or danger awareness.
Thank you very much
Okay.
for having me.
Okay, Kacy, thank you so much. Have a nice Sunday.
Thank you. Good times to you.
To you too.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.